Welcome to Behind the Line, the podcast where you'll get untold stories from first responders and military veterans. I'm Tim Hegman. I'll be your host. My guest today began his law enforcement career in 1993, and after serving in the law enforcement profession for 30 years, retired as a major in 2023. During those 30 years, he worked a variety of assignments to include patrol, gang investigations, training, technology, media relations, jail operations, and special operations that included SWAT, helicopter, K-9, dive team, bomb team, disaster response, special events, and the reserve program. He holds a Bachelor of Science Degree in Criminal Justice with a minor in Spanish, and a Master of Science Degree in Criminal Justice from Northeastern State University. He obtained his Doctorate Degree from Liberty University with a focus on strategic leadership. His website, which can be found on Substack, is called Courageous Police Leadership, and he has a podcast called Courageous Leadership. I subscribe to both, and I highly recommend you do as well. He's the author of the best-selling book, The Courageous Police Leader. He's a widely sought-out speaker for law enforcement agencies, schools, businesses, and conferences. His seminars range from leadership, tactics, survival, and resiliency. He was born in the South Bay in Southern California, but ended up in Arkansas. And like me, he enjoys playing golf, and most importantly, he's a lifelong Dodgers fan. Please welcome Dr. Travis Yates. Travis, welcome to the Behind the Line podcast.
Ian, thanks for having me, sir. I appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate you taking the time. I want to say, I don't think I'm the only one that's going to say this, but that's one impressive resume.
Well, I've been blessed through the years, Tim. You know that sometimes we can work hard, but you also need people around you and mentors, people to help you. And I didn't always have that, but I had enough of it to where the opportunities were put in front of me. And I'm proud of the 30 years, and we're just getting started, hopefully.
Well, hey, thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. You as well.
I appreciate that. Well, so obviously we're both retired. My retirement life is going fine. Knock on wood, it continues. How's retirement going for you?
It's fantastic, man. And, I think we all think about it a lot, but you don't really know what that is until it happens. And it's given me a lot of opportunities to do a lot of things that were in my head that I wanted to do that just didn't have the time or the resources to do it. So, I feel God's purpose for me is to keep helping the profession, and I did it locally for many, many years, and now I'm doing it more on a national level. So I'm really enjoying it.
Good. That's what retirement's all about. It's supposed to enjoy,
Yeah, man. I'm not getting enough golf in, but that's okay. That's okay. That will come.
Well, for me, golf, I love it, but it's a love-hate relationship.
Well, and I still have a hard time finding 4 or 5 hours, so that's the difficult part. But I'll go out there and swing the clubs around. I don't know if it's called a golf swing, but I go out there and attempt my best for a few hours and usually just come home. But yeah, it's great, and actually I'm glad I didn't find it earlier in my career. I probably would be homeless right now or totally broke. I didn't find it until 2 years ago. I thought golf was pretty silly, pretty dumb. I didn't understand it because I'm a baseball, football, traditional sport guy. And golf was not cool when I was a kid. As you probably know, there was no such thing as Tiger Woods back then. And my kids got out of high school and in college started playing with their friends. And I go, man, what is wrong with my kids? And one day they tricked me into going out there, and I got about 4 holes in and got really lucky and hit what they call that heroin shot, right? I hit that perfect golf shot.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh no, this is bad. So I've been hooked ever since.
A sign of things to come. I get it. Been there. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I subscribe to your Substack and I listen to your podcast. I love the way that you write, the way you interview, your guests. But I will say that, to learn that you're originally from the South Bay, which is where I live now, and we're doing this podcast from, at least I am, that you play golf. But to learn that you are a lifelong Dodgers fan, I thought, man, we can immediately be best friends.
Well, it's a crazy story, man. Just through the fate of God or my father, I'm not LAPD. I was out there for my 21st birthday, and I got up one Saturday morning, and my dad says, where are you going? Because all my relatives were out in that area. I said, I'm going down to the LAPD Academy to test. And he goes, no, I didn't leave California for you to come back to California. So
right.
Hold on for a minute. So I've got many good friends out there, but I didn't end up out there. But there were 2 rules growing up. Even though I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas, the 2 rules were this. You're going to watch the Dodgers when they play, and I'm waking you up every New Year's Day to watch the Rose Bowl parade. And to this day, I get a phone call on New Year's Day from my father saying, are you watching it? And I'm like,
that's right.
whether I am or not, I'm like, yes, I'm watching it.
Yeah. Well, hey, sometimes a white lie is okay.
That's true.
Yes. So before we really get into the podcast, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, family.
Well, really crazy. I grew up, my father was a police officer. He actually worked narcotics about 25 of his 27 years. And growing up as a kid in the 80s and early 90s with your dad in narcotics, I mean, you got to remember, man, the 80s and narcotics work was completely different.
Yep.
And he was on the task forces and working he was doing all this cool stuff. He'd come home one day with one car, another day with a Corvette. And I saw my first cell phone when he brought it home. It was a big bag phone. I was just enamored. I didn't need Superman or Batman as heroes. My dad and his friends, and I was around that. But surprisingly, I wasn't interested in going into law enforcement. And I was, I had an athletic background, played some college ball, and so I'm in college, working my path towards that. And then when I was 19 years old, I went on a ride along with a police officer, and it was one of these. And as you know, Tim, doing ride alongs, sometimes ride alongs are pretty boring. And then sometimes they aren't. And it was one of these ride-alongs where it was not boring. I can remember looking over at the guy about an hour in going, do they pay you for this? And he goes,
That's right.
He goes, every 2 weeks, man. I go, this is what I'm going to do. And so immediately changed my life forever. I wouldn't even be talking to you today if it wasn't for that ride along. Changed my degree in college. My dad says, I don't care what you do, but I want you to get a college degree. You can go do whatever. He still tried to talk me out of it a little bit, but I wasn't having it. And so all the plans growing up to be a lawyer or a prosecutor or a doctor, those went out the window when I did that ride along. And, listen, growing up with my dad, my dream was to be DEA. I don't know why. I had posters in my room, and I was all I could think about. And shocker, they wouldn't hire 21-year-old kids when I got out of college. So they say, hey, you got to get some local experience. So I just started applying everywhere. Tulsa was the first one that called. Hadn't been to Tulsa that much. Moved to Tulsa. Didn't know anybody. Just knew what I saw my dad do. Work hard, try to be good to people. And, and as the story usually goes, is I was still planning to leave in a few years, but as the story typically goes, I met a girl, right? And that changed my life forever. And so I blink, and 30 years in Tulsa. Now 3 kids, 23, 20, 13. The 13-year-old is another story. It's a short story, but it's a whole nother story on how that one happened. But throwing all the baby stuff out, we had the 2 kids and the 2 dogs. We were good, but God's got a funny way about it sometimes. And so man, I had a incredible career. Probably would have done a few years longer, even though I had no business doing it. There was nothing really much more for me to do, but I loved it. But I knew it was time. Obviously the political winds had changed. What Travis used to say wasn't valued the way it was at one time. And I started getting moved in positions to where they purposely didn't want me to really have a say so. And I sort of lost the love for that. And so I said, okay, this is an opportunity to take the things I've been doing for the department and maybe go more on a national scale. Unfortunately, about 5 years into my career, I got really involved in training. I was a big EVOT guy, Tim, emergency vehicle operations. It was early days of that. And I got in on that early days. I just loved it and ran our unit for about a decade. Got really involved on the national level, co-founded Below 100. Got on a CalPost committee for many, many years, doing a lot of work nationally while I was on the job. But as my career kept going in certain directions, I really got into leadership at that point. As I back up, I started getting called about 25 years ago to come train other departments. And I was like, well, I don't have time to do that. I didn't even know that was a thing. I'm training my own department.
Right.
And finally, one day I said yes, and I flew out to St. Louis. It's the first place I went to, and I just loved it. I met these other cops that were kind of dealing with the same thing I'm dealing with, and I kind of sort of got outside the bubble of where I was and just kept saying yes. And every year from then on got busier and busier and busier, and just kept training. And never really had a website, never really thought this was a business at all. But then several years ago, I decided this is probably something that I should probably continue to do even after retirement. So that's what I do full time now, is I train and consult other agencies. And really, about a decade ago, I saw the issues in leadership, and clear as day, I saw the issues in leadership. All the problems you can think of. We love to blame other people. We love to look out the window, right, Tim? Oh, it's the chief's fault. It's the mayor's fault. The activist's fault. Media's fault. But then I started seeing that we were doing this to ourselves. It was our own leadership that was buying off on a lot of this stuff. And of course, we've seen, what has occurred in the profession because of that. And so I got pretty vocal about leadership, launched a leadership course about 8-9 years ago. Didn't really want to, because I know what cops think when they hear about leadership courses, but it's completely the problem with our leadership courses is I call it leadership 101. Like we fill people's head full of knowledge on leadership, but we don't talk to them how you practice that, how you can practice that in the most dire situations. And so we built a course around that. And then in 2019, I wrote a book thinking, I'm kind of stupid. I thought, well, I write a book, more people will see what I'm talking about, and maybe the profession will save itself from what could come. And of course, 2020 came. And so we're deep down in that now, which is even more important than ever to talk about this stuff and to write about this stuff. So that's what I do now full time. I get up every day. I talk to cops all over the country, and I try to give them resources and things they need to help them. And we're seeing a gradual interest in it. I mean, not always the chiefs, not always the sheriffs, not always the upper rank, but it's a lot of people in the middle of these agencies and down below that really get it, which gives me hope.
Yeah, spot on. I appreciate you sharing that, because that's a great background. And, the fact that you still have a passion for what you started years ago, based on, a need, and now you're continuing to do it, is outstanding. I think, when it comes to the training and the leadership, oftentimes the person teaching the class has been out of, they're reading off a board.
Yeah.
It's they're mundane when they present it. It's the same old information. They're just kind of, they have their shtick and they're doing it and they're not believable. And the one thing you can't get past cops, you have to be genuine. Otherwise, within the first few minutes, they're looking at each other in the classroom going, what are we doing?
I see that dynamic, Tim, everywhere I go. And it's kind of funny. There's no question. I do another class called Second Survival, which is a behavioral science class on pre-attack indicators. Very popular. I've been all over the country doing that course. Even though my love is leadership, that course is obviously very needed because cops are not being exposed to that. But there's not a problem getting people packed into that course, that tactical cool course. But when you put the word leadership in a course, you see, okay, not many people here. They don't seem to be as excited. And I see the look in their eyes. They almost look depressed at the beginning of class. But then, of course, the first 15 minutes, they figure out, oh, this is not what I thought. This is not the typical, whatever acronym, leadership, quadruple trilogy certificate on my wall course that I'm used to. And then we really get into it and we have a good time. But that's a big paradigm shift to try to convince people, hey, not every course is the same. Because let's face it, Tim, we've got more leadership training, more leadership stuff out there than ever before. There's more head knowledge in our profession on leadership than ever before. Back when I was coming up, hey, you had to go to the FBI NA or the ones out in the West Coast, and that's pretty much it. Well, there's courses and organizations everywhere doing this. And cops, you're right, cops can smell BS. Cops know that if any of that worked, we would not be in this position right now. Right. None of this would have happened. So they know that stuff is bogus because all their bosses have been to it, and they keep acting the same. And so we're really trying to push a complete paradigm shift in what leadership needs to be. And it's not rocket science, but it's something that hasn't been practiced. So what we talk about is we need to take our leadership from our head to our heart. Because it can stay in your head, doesn't do you any good. But until it goes in your heart, you actually believe it. And you're actually to take the spears that are going to come at you when you practice it. It's not going to do you much good. And so that's why I eat courageous leadership. You can have all the leadership knowledge in the world, but if you're not courage and use it, it's not going to do us much good.
Yeah, spot on with that. I couldn't agree more. I want to dive into your podcast a little bit and your Substack and what you do. But at first, a couple things. So you you joined law enforcement in 1993. So from 1993 to when you retired in 2023, what are some of the significant changes you experienced that first benefited police officers, and then some that negatively impacted them?
Well, I hit the streets in early 94 after training and field training. And I specifically remember walking into that squad room and looking at my father from across the table. Wasn't my father, but he reminded me of my father. Marine Corps guy, Vietnam vet, hard, chiseled dude. I thought he was this old man, although he was younger than I am today, which is weird.
That's right.
And I remember thinking, you got to be kidding me, man. I got out of the house, got away from that cop Marine father of mine. Now I'm working for the guy. But that's what's changed is those guys are no longer here. They would never put up with what we put up with. They would never let anybody lie about you. They would never let anybody attack you. They would hold you accountable when you were wrong, but they would defend you to the end if you were right. And along the way, we lost that. And that support, we didn't get a lot of money back then. They're paying more money today than ever before. We none of us did it for the money. We still don't. But we knew that we were doing the greatest job on the planet. We were actually helping people. We were given the tools to help people. We were given the training to help people. There was no debate. Oh, are you a warrior? Are you a guardian? Oh,
Right.
all this nonsense. Oh, thin blue line is all of a sudden race. I mean, none of that stuff would have ever happened. Or if it did happen, it would have been nipped just like that. They would have put a stop to it. Now, all that is happening, and we've lost our core mission. We've lost our focus. Our only mission is actually in our name, Tim: law enforcement. That's our mission. It's
That's right.
not. They can say all these great fancy names and community this and community that. All that stuff's fine and dandy, but we've lost our actual mission, which is fighting crime. In fact, I don't think you can even get a chief's job today if you say your focus is fighting crime. You have to give them some feel-good answer like community trust and all these things that you can't even measure, right?
Yeah, those
And
buzzwords.
it's the ultimate virtue signaling in the profession that has ultimately hurt us. And so the difference is in the 90s, probably for the 15 years after that, we were completely mission focused. And that's why you saw Part 1 crimes reduced to a level we've never seen it before.
That's right.
You saw that. You saw when we're mission focused, we know how to deal with that mission. And then probably a decade, 15 years ago, we lost that. And you've seen the crime kick up ever since, right? And so it's not rocket science on why it's happened. If any company loses their mission, they're not going to do well. And that's where we're in the middle of right now. But the good part is it's leadership that made us lose the mission. It's also leadership where we can get our mission back. The problem is your mission is counterintuitive today to what people think, right? Everybody talks, defund police, abolish police. We need to reimagine police. Well, they won't tell you what any of that means. Okay, you want to reimagine it. What does that mean? Because what it means is don't follow your mission. We've got a lot of what I call them DOJ police chiefs that are just looking for a resume, looking for their next job or their consulting gig, have gone along with it. The enemy is actually within, but that's a good thing, Tim. If the enemy was on the outside, we would have very little control over that. But our enemy is within. It's with our own leaders. And I'm just on a mission to expose every single one of them, to be honest with you. I'm kind of one of just a few. Not many people want to go there.
Right.
We will not fix this. Nothing will ever get better if we don't start addressing what the real problem is, which is our own leadership.
Yeah, great points. I couldn't agree more. The thing is, and it's going to take time. People want change. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. A lot of people don't want change. But for change to happen, sometimes situations like this topic, some situations you can make change right away.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big one because of where we're at now over all these years. It's like turning an aircraft carrier around. You can't do it on a dime. It's going to take a long time to turn that around. And if there weren't people like you and a few others that were focused on this and that was, their passion, it wouldn't happen. And we need people out there who are going to take those risks, take those, like you said a few minutes ago, take the spears for others. But in the long run, it's going to benefit law enforcement, the profession overall.
Yeah, and the deck's stacked against us. I know that. Our police organizations that are multi-million-dollar organizations are in on the scam. They're the ones pushing a lot of this because a lot of their money is coming from sources that are also pushing it. And so we're up against all of them. And so you can't be scared to talk about them. And they don't like it, but I've had this sort of running challenge. I go, hey, sit down with me and let's debate this. Yep. None of them will do that because they know, which is even sadder. They know what they're doing is destroying their profession, but it's all for self and not for the greater good. So, but we need more people because if you're the only person in the arena, you're going to get the bruises and bumps, right? But if there's a bunch of us in the arena, good luck with that. And that's what we're trying to build here. My website is travisyates.org. We're trying to build a complete community to just take this profession back. And it's not rocket science, Tim. We need to start getting back to our mission because guess who really needs that? The citizens, right? Mm-hmm. I sort of laugh when everybody talks about, the citizens. Well, nobody cares about the citizens. We're the ones that speak for them. We stand between them and the bad elements in those communities. And as long as our attention is directed to the TikTok dances and the ice bucket challenges and community this or community that or whatever program the DOJ is pushing down our throat, as long as we're directed on that, we don't get to actually deal with the mission. And the citizens, by and large, almost all of them, they just want a safer community. That's all they want. And we're the ones that can provide that, but we've gotten away from that. So it's time to get back.
Yeah, I agree. So with all that in mind, currently, what are some challenges police departments are currently facing, such as, like recruiting, retaining officers, officer wellness, the lack of accountability at all levels, for officers, supervisors, commanders, and police chiefs?
Well, that's a big topic. Let me just take a couple of them and you can tell me what I forgot. Well, first off, let's talk retention. People don't understand that you're never going to catch up to recruiting if you don't fix retention. And retention is solely centered on leadership. People are not leaving law enforcement. Law enforcement's left in. Those agencies have left those officers. They were lied to. They were in the academy 15, 20 years ago and told one thing. Now they're getting something completely different. They were told something like this, Tim. I'm sure you heard it. Hey, just follow policy, follow the law, be reasonable, objective reasonableness, just do your best, make the best decision with the limited information you have. We're going to take care of you. It's not true. They're trying to throw cops in prison for literally doing their job. And so you can't make a job impossible and expect people to want to do that job or stay in that job. And so retention is a much more difficult issue because you have to fix the leadership issue, i.e. the culture issue in individual agencies. Now, there's some agencies doing it very, very well, and we'll get into that. But then on the front end is recruitment. Now, that's a little bit different because most people are not hiring into law enforcement thinking, well, what's the leadership and culture like here? They've been inundated with all the marketing that's out there. And so those are probably, obviously leadership's huge, it's everything, but right below that has got to be recruitment, because if you don't fill your department, you're done. Like there's municipalities in this country right now that are literally contracting out with sheriff's departments. Like they cannot fill their beats. And we're within 5 years, we're going to see large metropolitan agencies go under. You've got St. Louis PD right now, just left St. Louis. 2,000 officers. A few years ago, they're down to 750. No one's talking about it. They're done. They're over. You're never going to recover from that unless you get hyper-focused on recruiting. Minneapolis starts at 850. They'll be at 400 within the year. Meanwhile, you can go to all their social media. You think they're doing awesome, right?
Right.
So we're going to have large agencies go under in a few years if we don't get a handle on this. And so we get back to the recruiting angle. There is a right way to recruit and wrong way to recruit. The truth is, we never had to recruit. I ran a recruiting unit. I know that. The application just came in no matter what we did. We ran around to job fairs and we talked to people. But heck, when you and I applied, Tim, no one, you applied and you waited for months. No one would even call you. Because they had so many applications. I tested with 1,000 people for 9 positions.
Yes.
There was no reason to recruit. Now we had so-called recruiters, but they were just marketers. They put their uniform on, they go to a job fair, say hi, wave, pass out some pencils and go home. That's not really recruiting. The problem is I call now the 80-20 rule. You still have, fortunately, in most cities, 80% of the people are called to do that job. They're going to apply for that job. That's most cities. There's some cities worse than that. But now the 20% you got to go find. See, we used to have 300-400% of people trying to come onto our departments. We would pick the best of the best.
Right.
So you still have that. You still have people that want to go into this profession. But we got to go out and find the other 20, 30, sometimes 40%, depending on the agency you're in. And what we did back in the day with all those candidates, you can't do that. Job fairs aren't going to help you. Dressing up in uniform, handing out a pencil is not going to help you. None of it's going to, let people apply and never call them is not going to help you. And so what departments did is, some are thinking about this, is they ran out and they sort of doubled down on what they did. They added websites, they added recruiting videos, all marketing. Marketing was never designed for recruiting. And now it's funny how these departments go, I just talked to the department. They spent $3 million on a marketing campaign. I mean, you name it, the websites, the videos, all this stuff. And the recruiting got worse and they just don't understand. Wow. They don't understand it. In fact, that's the story with most agencies that market. And then, of course, you have these marketing companies that took advantage of that. They actually, traditional marketing companies, they would DBA we're police recruiting this, or we're this or that. I mean, I know all the names. I won't tell them here.
Right.
And they go out and make all these crazy promises and take all this money, and it doesn't help them one bit. And so what you see with marketing companies, I saw at my agency, is they would come to staffing and they go, hey, we got 2,000 more web hits last month. And everyone would kind of clap their hand. And I was a guy going, well, how many recruits did you get? I don't care about web hits. That's what marketing companies do. After selling a product, and you have to expose someone to that product 7 to 21 times as a touch point to get them to make a decision on the product. We're not a product. We're actually, there's a reason. And the weird thing is, Tim, we get this right when we go to hire chiefs. We hire recruiting firms, headhunters to go out and find chiefs or city managers. We understand that, but all of a sudden for police officers, we think we can throw a video up and a fancy website and people will do. I mean, not one person listening to this in law enforcement went to your department because you saw a website. Not one, but when I say website, they're spending $19.95 price for websites. I saw a bid last week where a department spent $50,000 for a website and $60,000 for a video. It's just unbelievable. And of course, they blow through their budget. Then they wonder why it's not working. And so to recruit, we actually have to go out and find those candidates. And there's only one company doing it. I'll pitch it because I love these guys. I think they're the answer. It's called Safeguard Recruiting. Former cops, they retired and went to the trucking industry, were recruiters in the trucking industry, which is the most difficult place to recruit. Trucking companies have 100% turnover most of the time, unless you're driving for the big companies. And most of those places don't have websites, they don't have social media presence. And they went out and just killed it. And they came over to law enforcement. They saw that, man, there's no one doing this. And no one's doing it because there's not a lot of money in it. There's a lot of money in $50,000 websites.
Oh, yeah.
Or videos that don't fix the problem, and you convince them to hire you again, right? Because they give these departments, they make them happy by, look, all the web hits you got now. They're seeing your website. None of that works. And so these guys have been very, very successful. They're not as busy as they should be because they are the answer. But that one department that spent $3 million, I'm not going to name the department, it's a top 10 city in America. They sent them 1,500 people in 4 weeks. 1,500 in 4 weeks.
Wow.
For a fraction. When I say a fraction, every hiring bonus you've heard of, it was less than that, right? Every hiring bonus, like if there was a $10,000 hiring bonus, they spent less than that to get 1,500 people. And so recruiting actually works, but most of our agencies either don't understand it or they don't want to understand. I'll give you a quick story. I saw with the governor of Louisiana about a month ago filed a declaration of emergency in the entire state because of police staffing. Well, all these departments have marketed, it's not working. Of course, it's not going to work. I reached out to the governor, a bunch of his staff members, a bunch of the politicians, a bunch of the police leaders. I said, hey, I'm not selling you anything, but I'm 8 hours away. I'll be on your doorstep tomorrow to help you. Nobody called me, but nobody contacted me back. And that's, I've done that to several large departments where I read articles where they're basically hurting. I said, hey, I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I've seen the data. I know what works. I'll be glad to talk to you and help you. Right. Nobody. So I don't know. I don't know if they want to fix it, if they're confused by it, or they're just so enamored by these fancy recruiting videos. You know, Washington, D.C. Metro Police One just named them the best recruiting video of the year. Oh. They're the lowest staffing in history. No one's putting two and two together, right? It's like, it's like
really?
If you live in Chicago, you keep voting Democrat. Like no one's putting together. What's going on here? Like you're at the lowest staffing in history and you're proud of your recruiting video. Okay, that's fine. Do a recruiting video, but that's not recruiting. That's marketing. And so I've done a lot of work on that. I filming some training videos all for free, just trying to help out departments because I recognize I may not be in the business anymore, but I've got kids and I've got family. They're going to be growing up in this country. And if we don't staff our law enforcement agencies, we're all in deep trouble. And I think we got about a 2 or 3 year window to do it. Because once you get so far down, it is over, man. It is over. You're never going to catch up to that. And so we have to understand it. So that is probably one of the most pressing issues in our profession that I think we're scared to talk about because politically, you don't want your mayor to think that you're screwing it up, right? If you're the person that championed a fancy website, you don't want to tell your chief you gave them the wrong advice. So they just kind of keep doubling down on it. And it's not going to work. Actual recruiting actually works. And I'll tell anybody listening, you can call me up. My number's right on my website, travisyates.org. That's my personal number. Call me up. I'll spend an hour with you on the phone. I'll help. I won't sell you anything. I don't have anything to sell you other than I know one company that's actually doing it right, but I will help you regardless because I see the importance and need of this. And I wish our leaders also saw the importance and need where they made the right decisions towards that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I will say, going back several years, 7 years, 8 years, something like that, the recruiting videos were a big hit and everybody was doing them. Oh yeah. We did them. And then, I think the video turned out very well. Other departments, their videos turned out very well. I'm not sure in the long run if it really served its purpose, what you're speaking to, but I will say there's a local agency here in the South Bay. I won't name it. It's a positive, but I probably shouldn't name the department, but, their body-worn cameras, they are very involved. Their officers, their staff, I'm not sure if they're all trained. I think they are. They have a fantastic tech med unit and their officers are trained and they post videos of them saving people. It could be a stabbing, it could be a shooting, it could be a heart attack, it could be choking victim, whatever. But they post those videos and you look and I'm like, people need to see this. This is what the police are doing out there. And, the hard work, the dangerous work, the courageous work, saving lives. And to me, those videos, You can just go on their website, click on them, and go, man, I had no idea that happened. If they're living in the city 3 blocks from me. And I think people, residents, citizens, the public, if they see that, it may really have, I'm not sure, more respect for what's being done and what the troops are doing out there.
And you touched on that, Tim. That's exactly what video and websites should be for. It's a marketing tool to sway your public and to tell the truth about what's going on, just like any product would do. And so there is a lot of value in that. We just think that it helps us with hiring, and it doesn't really help us with hiring. But I will tell you this on video, we've really messed that up. We have the greatest tool and resources at our disposal to show the public how good we are. Body camera. Nobody else in their right mind would wear body cameras to work. During COVID, the school teachers raised all kinds of hell because, oh my gosh, you can't watch my classroom, right?
Right.
Our profession raises our hand and says, yeah, film us all day. About 75 to 80% of our profession wears them the entire shift right now and records. What a tool. But if you were an alien and you came down to Earth, which they tell us now is real, which is kind of weird that no one even really cared about that when they said that. Oh, we've been lying to you for 50 years. They're actually real. Okay, next story. If you were an alien and came down to Earth and went to YouTube, you would think all we did was shoot people. That's all we did, because those are the only videos we release. And we have mounds and mounds, millions of hours of videos of doing this fantastic work. And for some reason, our leaders don't put it out. And I forget live PD and whatever body cam shows are out there. We have the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, chiefs listening to this can flip a switch and put out 10, 15 videos a day of great work. How does that not help our profession? So it really kind of freaks me out on why we haven't done that. I don't understand that whatsoever. I fought that at my own agency and lost every time I tried. Legal would come in and this and that, and none of it makes any sense. Oh, I could be a third-party citizen and FOIA the video and put it up, but you can't put it up. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and I think everybody knows that. But I don't know why we don't want to do that, because we have the opportunity when people lie about us, when all this narrative is going out there, we can immediately shut that down with real hard evidence, because the minute that we're speaking right now, Tim, there are videos being made right now that the public should see that they'll never see. And I've heard of videos like, there's been active shooter videos where officers did heroic stuff where the department won't even put them out. But if we shoot somebody and it's controversial, we're putting the video out. None of this makes sense to me. So there's really an unbalance here, and we have an incredible tool that we're just not using. We talk about that in our training all the time. And I'm glad to hear that from that agency, because it shouldn't be a rare story. That shouldn't be a unicorn. That should be what everybody's doing. And so I'm glad someone finally gets it and understands it. We just need everybody to understand it.
I agree. Yeah, we need to. Sometimes, if we're going to promote law enforcement, we need to be active in doing that to show the great work that's being done. So we'll move on in just a second, but I have a question for you in regard to recruiting, because you talked about the numbers. When I came on, you came on, you'd have 1,000 people show up. They would do testing for 3 days, morning, afternoon, morning, afternoon, morning, afternoon. Now you have people apply. You may have a certain percentage, a small percentage actually show up.
Yep.
What do you think about, I shouldn't phrase that question like that, but to get people, agencies are reducing what it takes to become a police officer. They are, you got the 6-foot wall. I heard of an agency where they said, if you can't get over the wall, it's okay. You go around it during the physical agility. So they're lowering the standards. Some are, and maybe it's because I don't know why. It's something I disagree with, because a 6-foot wall is a 6-foot wall back in 1985 and 2024. So what do you think? Why? Do you think that's going to be corrected in time, or do you see that?
No, I see a lot of it, and it's a abject failure of leadership. You're leading an agency and you're purposely lowering the standards of the agency, which, by the way, probably weren't that high to begin with. We're not the Navy SEALs here. You don't have to be in tremendous shape to get through these standards. But we've done this before. Back in the 80s in Miami, they lowered standards. They ended up hiring gang members. In that day, it was about diversity. And you saw several agencies, Miami being the most high profile, lowered their standards to hit diversity numbers. And you saw, to this day, they're paying the price, because what happens when you hire on lower standards, that creates problems for the next 20 or 30 years for that agency. So it's almost like they're playing right into what all these cop haters want, right? They've created an environment that makes recruiting hard. So instead of us actually figuring out what recruiting is, figuring out what retention is, and doing what it takes to maintain that, it's recruiting is hard everywhere. I mean, everyone's having trouble hiring no matter what profession these days, but they're not lowering the standards. We do because of our leadership.
Right.
And what's going to happen is Memphis is just the tip of the iceberg. That's the incident in Memphis. Those officers were hired under lower standards. There's, oddly enough, we're not told a lot about that anymore, which is weird because sometimes we'll talk a lot about these incidents that in Memphis just kind of went away. The chief job, even though she was behind that unit. At least one or two of those folks, they say, should never been hired under the old standards. The lowering standards created some of that hiring. They were all young officers put in a unit with no supervision or lack of supervision. Nobody wants to talk about that, right? It's all a leadership issue. But that's just the tip of the iceberg and what's going to occur as we lower standards, because you're going to get people inside a department that would have never should have been inside that department. But guess what they're going to do? They're not going to blame the leaders for it. They're going to blame racist this or cops this. They'll put the blame on us again, as they always have, or the profession as a whole, when the fact is it's a leadership decision that will create a problem for years for that agency and that community. And atrocious. Does it surprise me? No. I've seen these kind of decisions a lot from leaders that don't want to lead. They don't want to make the tough decisions. They don't want to do what it takes to actually recruit, to actually retain. But it's a road that I will tell you will not be good for American law enforcement if we keep doing it.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's switch gears. So let's talk about leadership. So, what makes someone a leader? What makes them stand out as a leader?
Yeah, the first thing that we have to understand, and our profession is really bad about it, has nothing to do with rank or authority. I ask people in my seminars all the time, hey, when's the first time you were exposed to this issue called leadership? And most of the supervisors or ranks will say, they sent me to a supervisor school. That's not leadership. It's usually management training, right? Yeah, I went to FBINA. I'll just tell you, it's a great school, but it's not a leadership school. It's a management school, pushing paperwork and things like that. But in the military folks in my class, they'll say, we were exposed to leadership day one as the first level basic training. Day one, they start talking about leadership. Now, I haven't found a cop yet that has given me that answer in a police academy, if they were exposed to leadership day one. And because we attribute leadership to some sort of rank. Folks, some of the best leaders we have no rank.
Right.
And so leadership is nothing more. And you ask 100 people, you get 100 different definitions. In fact, oddly enough, in my seminars, we don't go into a bunch of definitions because it sort of means something different to everybody. But at the end of the day, it's about influence. It's influencing others. And it's all about, I can simplify it into this, Tim. Leaders care for others. Leaders support others. To a leader, it's not about them, it's about others. To a leader, it's not about their resume, it's about their resumes. It's not about our dreams, it's about their dreams. It's about giving up self, sacrificing for others. That's why we have a void in it, because our profession is built around me, myself, and I. Building the resume, building the love me walls, getting all the certificates, right? And you look above you, and they got there that way. So if you want to get there, you do the same thing. And it's all emulated. And it takes individuals on an individual basis to display leadership that doesn't care about any of that. And it's very rare when you see it, but everybody listening to this can think of somebody that impacted their life in a positive way, rank or not. They can name you a name right now, Tim. That's what leadership is at the end of the day. If you're thinking of that name as somebody that made your life better, that impacted you, that mentored you, that coached you, that helped you, that's a leader. And what I would ask all those folks that are giving me that name right now is, okay, what are you doing for others? Because that's what leadership's about. And we complicate it, right? We complicate with all the theories and all the practice and the art of leadership and the charisma and all this crazy stuff. And all this, let's go to 3 or 4 weeks of training to do this or that. And man, I've got to tell you, that complications hurt us, because at the end of the day, if we just care for people more, we help people more, that fixes everything. They've been doing a survey, Tim, in the business world for 30 or 40 years. And it's basically a survey on retention. And they ask these business employees, why do you stay at your job? The number one answer ever since they started the survey was, of course, the recruiting video and salary. No, that's not it. That's
right.
Number one answer.
No.
Salary and benefits are important, but it's usually 4th or 5th in line. The number one answer why they stay in their job has always been support. My leaders support me. My supervisor supports me. They let me do my job. And if our profession would just get to that, we solve a lot of problems, but we're pretty far away from that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Support is I can flash back to a briefing I was at during 2020, probably around April 2020. And the topic amongst the troops was support. They wanted to make sure we had their back. And, so that was time for another conversation, but that was a big deal to them at the time, considering all that was going on in 2020. So, but you just mentioned about me, and for people, and what a leader should do is to help others. So I read this month, and I wrote a note on it. So it's a nice segue into one of your articles on your Substack, and it was called "Let Them Shine," and it was published on March 8th of this year. And if you can you just do a brief talk briefly about what that means? Let them shine.
Well, I got that term from Dale Stockton, who's a Southern California guy, used to run Law Officer magazines, the editor there. And Dale kept seeing these great officers with great training who were helping out a lot of people, and their own agency was just screwing them. Just every chance they get, their own agency was really messing with them. So he writes this article, and I may or may not have been the subject of that article amongst 3 or 4 other trainers. And unfortunately, I kept seeing that. And I'll harken back to when I broke in, there was a sergeant, I'll just name his name, Jim Clark, just a godlike figure at my agency, tactical guy, SWAT guy, great trainer. And I saw early on that they quit letting him train. They basically, he spent most of his career in patrol. He was never going to get any fancy assignments, even though I think patrol's pretty fancy if you ask me. But, I just saw him sort of messing with him from afar. And so as a young officer, that was impression upon me. So I sort of always, whenever I did things outside my department, I wouldn't vocalize it. I'd take vacations. I'd do what I did. And, but I started seeing sort of that happen to myself,
Oh, wow.
all the way to the point to where, I was at ILETA, which is, International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. If you're a police trainer, you're probably familiar with ILETA. In fact, the conference was just in St. Louis last week. And back in 2008, they named me the International Trainer of the Year, which really surprised me. But I immediately thought to myself, man, if my department finds out about this, I'm going to get screwed, right? Because I knew the environment. But it's not just my department; it's a lot of departments. And because this article had come out around that time period, and sure enough, I didn't say anything, but one of the staff members read it in a magazine somewhere, and they announced it. And it wasn't a month later, I was booted out of training. No, they didn't say that was the reason, but I saw that myself, and I saw through the years where it would almost be a passive aggressiveness. They couldn't do anything to me, but they didn't make me popular to write a book, even though I didn't broadcast. I got transferred after I wrote a book because one of my bosses said I wrote it about him, and I go, that's insane. You're not that interesting. It's a next book, I want to write a book about you. Yeah. I sort of saw it. It didn't bother me, so I sort of expected it. But what bothers me when I see it happen to other people, and I've seen that routinely happen to other people. And any department, regardless of size, has some of the smartest people in different topics, Tim. I mean, Manhattan Beach, I know right now there's a guy there that loves video editing and audio. Just there is. There's a guy there that loves computers. There's a guy there that loves policy and procedure, even though that's weird. There's a guy there that he lives and breathes use of force, right, or gal. We need to tap into that. We sit in our ivory towers as leaders and we think we know all this stuff. Well, that's our problem. You don't. In fact, you simply don't. And some know more than others for sure, but I was in a lot of cool assignments, and a lot of them I didn't know much about, but I had great people around me where I would just go, hey man, you're the expert here. You're the expert here. Let me hear from you. And they're scared to even say anything. But once you tap into that expertise of these agencies, it makes us great. But we have this sort of wall to where we somehow think that if we let people do that, we empower them. That's the basic leadership term. We empower them. The empowerment, I got to give up my power, give it to you for decision-making expertise or whatever. I may not get the credit for that, right? Well, that's the silliest thing I ever heard of, because guess what happened when I empowered those people around me? I still got lots of credit because they did great work, because I was the one over those folks. And so it's very simple in theory. It makes sense to me, but I don't see it very often. So I was just sort of encouraging people to go, man, you don't need to hire some expert on outside the zip code to do this or that. Who's in your department? What do they know? If you don't know who's in your department and the things they like, I mean, I mean, I'm talking everything in most, most departments above 50 officers are going to have somebody that pretty much lives and breathes something. It may
Yeah.
not even be related to law enforcement. There's oftentimes a way to mold that into law enforcement, right? And to bring that in. And by the way, you're talking about retention. If you can mold someone's love away from the job inside the job, they're never leaving that job. They
Right.
never are. I mean, I know me, I love training. The years that they put me in those roles in my agency, man, you wouldn't have been able to pry me loose with a crowbar. I was all in. I was working 15, 16 hours a day for my agency, right? And then the years that they pulled me away to stuck me in a corner somewhere, man, it was depressing to go to work. So
Yeah.
if you can find out what the men and women love and then make that part of the job as well, man, there is not a limit on what we can achieve. But the problem we're seeing is, I'll harken back to that Dale Stockton article, Let Them Shine. The problem we see is we're so hesitant to do that because I don't understand it. Like, that's part of my problem, Kim. Like, I don't understand it. Sometimes I wish I was one of these evil, maniacal monsters out here leading the department, because then I would totally understand this stuff. But I don't understand why we don't want the people inside our agencies, basically say, let them do what they do and say, get after it. Right. Man, there's certainly people that do, but there's a lot that don't. And if we would just flip the switch on that, swallow our pride, swallow our ego, and go, man, get after it. I've got your back. Let me know what you need. Put them in positions. I put them on we have a problem putting people on the right bus, right? I mean, I saw it time and time again. We put people in specialty units, and we would forego somebody that should have been in that unit. They lived and breathed it, but they don't get along with people as well, or I don't really like them as well, or they did something 10 years ago I didn't like, right? So the old term is the good old boy system, right?
That's right. Yep.
Well, that's alive and well. We may call it something different. It's alive and well. I mean, I was over special operations, which all these cool units. Everybody wanted helicopters and bombs. Everybody wanted these units. I'd sit in these interview panels, and some guy would come in, and they lived and breathed helicopters their whole life, man. They flew it in the military. They love it. That's what they do. And they get up and walk away, and the panel would go, yeah, but 5 years ago, this guy got in trouble for this, or this guy did this or that. I'm like, what are you talking about? I saw it every day. And if we plug the right people in the right seat in our agencies, man, I don't even think we understand how good we would be. But there's a hesitancy to do that, and that's why I wrote the article.
Yeah, no, it was a great article. I read it when it came out, obviously, and it stuck with me because I see that, and I saw that before. And you're right. We put the wrong people, in the bus that they don't belong there,
right?
For whatever reason. And there are people that are being bypassed.
I'll tell you, Tim, I got a quick story. I was over a traffic unit as one of my assignments one time, and the traffic sergeant was a good dude. I mean, that's why he was there. He was a good guy. Everyone liked him, but he didn't give a rip about traffic, right? It was Monday through Friday, weekends off, good guy. And I come in there, and I'm like, and I've got multiple of these type of stories. And I called him in. I said, hey, listen, man, you and I both know this ain't you. Like, you're a lot of things, but this isn't you. You're riding this out, looking for something else. We get that. But there's a cat down the road here that lives and breathes this. I'm going to put him in your spot. And man, this guy got crazy mad, right? Because that's a personal thing to him. I said,
Right.
It's not personal, man. It's business. I'm trying to operate the best division I can. It's not personal. I like you a lot, but I'm not in the business of putting people I like a lot in positions. I said, I want to put the best people in there. And that caused a little bit of riff. We made up later on, and he understood that later on. In fact, I was transferred to where he then went, which was a place made for this guy. He was great at it. And he walks in, he's like, hey, you're going to kick me out? And I go, man, what did I tell you in the traffic unit? You said it was just business. And I go, yeah, man, well, you belong here.
Right.
You're running. You belong on this ship. You're going to stay here as long as I'm here. And he was like, oh, but the reason he felt that way is his entire career, he saw it the other way.
Yeah.
He saw it all being personal all the time. And we have to get that out of there. We have got to be in a business mindset, just like the private industry does, Tim. I mean, private industry can't mess around. They would go bankrupt if they were picking people in positions based on their friendships or who they liked or whatever. I mean, you look at Steve Jobs and some of these other people, they were not nice people, but they knew their job.
Right,
they knew
exactly.
their job very well, and they were very successful at it. So I know why we don't. It's easy not to. I don't want to create a rift. I don't want to create a conflict. I don't want someone to be mad at me. Don't be a leader, man. Don't be a leader. If you're listening to this and you call yourself a leader and everyone likes you, you're doing that job wrong. I can guarantee you that.
Very true. I remember when I was in the police academy, kind of going way back, and I remember the instructor telling us multiple times, hey, you know what? And this is in 1988. said, if you're not being sued
Hey,
or
Tim, you know what 1988 was, right? You know
what's
what
that?
1988 was?
Oh,
Dodger
yes.
Series with Kirk Gibson, man.
That's right. That home run.
Where were you when he hit the home run?
I was watching it. I was in my room, living room, watching it. Yeah.
I was a senior in high school on my dad's couch. My dad was traveling. I was there with my mother and watching the game. He hits it. 5 minutes later, my dad calls and we're screaming and hooping and hollering. I remember it like it was yesterday, man.
Me too. And it's funny whenever it's on, TV, because we've watched the Dodger channel, their own channel, and they'll replay that over and over. And literally every time I see it, I still get goosebumps. And,
oh my goodness.
And my daughters, who are now big baseball fans, like diehard, but when they were younger, they'd say, Dad, you've already seen this. I'm like, I know, but you can never see it enough. Yeah, 1988.
To this day, in my gym at my house, I've got a big giant poster of Kirk hitting the home run. He's autographed it for me. Just every day I get to look at it. Yeah, man. When you look back at, I don't remember much as a child, but I remember that like it was yesterday. So
yeah, no.
And a bunch of people are on the freeway driving away from the game, but say they were there. By the way, they weren't there.
They were not there. No, there's video of that. You can see all the cars going out. Yeah. So great story, man. We're gonna have to talk more baseball. Especially when you come out this way.
I'm sorry for interrupting you there, but I couldn't resist. No. When I hear the words 1988, if I'm at a drive-through and they go, it's going to be $19.88, I got to tell them the story about 1988. Right?
Hey, we're going to get along just fine. Trust me. I love it. But real quick. So getting back, I remember the instructors, because they said it multiple times in the academy. Hey, as a police officer, if you're not being sued or not having complaints, you're not doing your job. As a supervisor, a manager, chief, when you hold people accountable, because that's what has to happen, you're not doing it in a vindictive way. You're not doing it because you have a grudge, but it's the right thing to do. And people get upset. That just happens all the time. When I was working, I'd have officers come up and say, hey, I'm thinking about testing for sergeant, or hey, I'm thinking about testing for lieutenant. Then you can tell me. I would always start off with, you need to be ready to make those difficult decisions. If you can't, it's going to be tough for you. Have to be able to make those, difficult decisions. And sometimes it's going to be your buddies. I had to do that several times and it was never easy. It may have seemed, but it was, from somebody on the outside, very difficult. But that was my job, to do certain things and make those decisions. And hopefully I made a lot of good decisions that made people happy. But I know there was decisions, like every leader, you're going to make those decisions where people are going to not be so excited about what just came down, but it was necessary to do. So yeah, it's tough. It can be tough.
Yeah. And I think we lie to ourselves, right? We see a Jocko quote, we watch the podcast. I think this leadership thing is something that's kind of easy. It's actually one of the most difficult things you can do if you do it right.
Right.
And so we sort of have our whole society as a whole is sort of a society of comfort, right? I mean, I could go click a button and watch pretty much anything I want. It's all, and we think leadership is that. Oh, maybe it's a pay raise or it's this, it's that. That's not what leadership is. It's completely different than supervision or management or whatever it is. It's completely different. And, I've got plenty of bruises and scars from it, but I know I was also able to help a lot of people by doing the right things. And even though maybe at the time I didn't like it, but most of them have all looked back and thanked me for some of those things. So yeah, we have the wrong mindset of it. And we have to do a better job in the academy, talk about this and preparing people, because most people that are testing for ranks, they haven't even thought about this leadership thing. I mean, no. I was not, until I learned myself, and I mean, I wouldn't end up getting a doctorate degree, and until I decided to go learn myself about leadership, no one was talking to me about this stuff. I learned most of my leadership, good and bad, from just watching people, right? There was no formal education, no formal training. We say there is, but there's not really one out
there. Yeah, Colin Powell, who I admire very much, one of his things that he would say, and I forget exactly the verbiage, but I think I got it right when he said, hey, it's lonely at the top.
Yeah. 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 The other thing he said that I really value is he was asking at a press conference, just an impromptu question, like, what's the most important thing about leadership? And he says, trust, man, trust.
Yeah.
And we get that wrong too. Like, we expect us, because of our rank, to just trust us. And that's backwards, right? That's backwards. We have to trust them. And then you hope by trusting them, by leading, they will then trust you. And then that synergy is pretty powerful. But to trust them first, most people are unwilling to do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're never going to really gain true trust until you kind of, once again, swallow your pride, get rid of your ego, and trust them to do a great job. And once they recognize that you're trusting them, they're going to in turn trust you. And that's when it gets pretty magical, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I get that. A lot of the stuff we just talked about can be concerning. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But there's a lot of good things going on as well. Can you share some of the good things that you experienced when you were working or since your retirement that you see in law enforcement? Not just, well, you can say chiefs, commanders, or officers, or, deputies, the good work that they're doing, some of the good stories that, where they went above and beyond when it came to leadership.
Well, the truth is it's happening more than anybody would know. But it's being drowned out by a bunch of other silly stuff, right? I mean, almost everybody I've been around in this profession. I mean, I say this a lot, some of the best people I've ever met have been in this profession. Some of the worst people I ever met have been in this profession, right? Which is pretty odd, but above and beyond, man. I mean, I know right now, I can't really name too many specifics to this going on right now, but I know middle managers right now that made a decision against their boss's will, against their chief's will, the right decision. And they said, hey, if you do this, we're going to remove you from your specialty assignment. We're going to put you on graveyard. We're going to do this to you. And the guy goes, get on with it. Yeah. This is the right call. That's happening more because that's not publicized, right? But I hear from these guys and gals every single week, and there are people that are stepping up, understanding the importance of what real leadership is. Even they may be working. That's the other thing. You may be working for somebody that's not a leader whatsoever, or in fact, be quite the opposite. But you below can still be a leader and overcome much of that because the sergeant's got troops. You can isolate. If you lead those troops well, doesn't matter what the chief's doing. Same way with lieutenants or captains. If you're leading those groups well, doesn't matter. The leadership can kind of block a lot of that, but that leader is going to catch holy hell from the top. And I'm hearing stories of that each and every day of people that are doing the right thing because they understand it. By the way, to their detriment. I mean, right. A couple stories I know, they were flat out told, you're never getting off graveyard. You're never being promoted again. As long as I'm here, you're never doing this or that. And that's the sort of a fork in the road, Ken, that most people aren't willing to swallow.
That's right.
Most people don't want to give that up. And that's why they sort of fold. But that's how we change things. That's how we make things better by those individuals. I want to make sure your audience understands this. It doesn't take a chief or sheriff or major or captain or anybody to make things better. You have an opportunity to make things better. That's the power of leadership right there. And that's what we all need to understand. If we understood that, these bad chiefs wouldn't even matter. They would be like at the retirement home because they would not be able to operate. But the problem is so many of us will conform, right, because we want what they have, or we don't want to be, nobody likes to be talked bad about. Nobody likes to have bad assignments. And we conform based on that. And the chief, when the chief's got IA at his beck and call, he can make your lives pretty miserable. But it takes really courageous men and women to step up and do the right thing. Listen, a lot of great leaders are unemployed right now. A lot of them, because they did the right thing. But guess what? They're sleeping very sound in their bed because of it. They know what they did was right. And that's what we have to get that attitude. Because if there's more of us got that attitude, the profession changes for the better instantaneous.
Yeah, I agree. So many people are oftentimes, people relate leadership to rank. And I know we've talked about this and you mentioned it just a few minutes ago, but there are so many people, officers, deputies, first responders, that are at the line level that are great leaders. And I knew a couple. One was my partner for many years, and he and I would talk offline. He was very well respected within the department, a true leader, knowledgeable. And we thought, why don't you should test for sergeant. And he's like, no, I'm good doing what I'm doing. And he was very good at doing what he was doing. So I respect that. And in the long run, he was developing other officers who were then promoting. But he was good doing what he was doing. But in my mind, and I worked with him for 30 years and rode in the same car with him for many years, he was a great leader. So it's not just about rank.
No, we really messed that up. In fact, we try, the bad leaders at the top try to keep messing up because they will make you, we have this hierarchical system, as you know, right? Well, okay, you're a brand new officer. Don't say anything for 3 or 4 years. We don't want to hear from you. Oh, maybe you made sergeant. Oh, we'll let you behind the curtain a little bit, but not very much. Oh, now you've made captain or major. Well, you get to do this or that, but you don't get to do everything. And we attribute rank or authority with that decision-making process. And it's the exact opposite. If we would just tap into every single person's a leader. You don't think of those geese or goose that are flying across the country, right? All in a V shape, and the bird in the front's gonna get tired. The other bird steps up. If they were police birds, Tim, they would all be stabbing each other in the back and all go in different directions, right? Yeah. But they're not. They're all in the same direction, no matter who's in front. Because you have to think there was some little basic goose academy that said, hey, every one of you has a responsibility because you can't ever rely on the bird in the front. If we just got that attitude, and we have to talk about it day one, and because we're hiring really good men and women. I mean, in our communities, and they haven't got the credit for that, but we're hiring really good men and women. No other profession has the vetting process that we have. And then we tell them to be quiet. We tell them to shut up. We tell them you're not a rank yet, so you can't do this or that. If we would just get rid of that, man, it would be amazing what we could see. And we're the ones that are keeping it from happening because we're the ones that are kind of making that process like that. But it shouldn't be like that for sure.
Yeah. Well said. So with all that we've talked about, is there anybody that stands out to you as like somebody who you just admire, you respect, you look up to as a leader? And if you're comfortable mentioning his or her name and why, that'd be great. If you don't want to mention the name, not a problem at all.
Well, I'll name someone that many of your audience may know, Sheriff Mark Lamb out in Pinell County. And I've been to his agency last 3 or 4 years, and he doesn't need me at his agency. Some of these sort of quasi celebrities that you see, they're quite different when you meet them in person, and I've seen that. I first met Mark Lamb up in the middle of nowhere in Eureka County, Nevada, about 3 years ago. I was up there teaching at a conference, and I walk in, and he's in the audience. And this was in the heyday of Live PD. You saw Mark with a cowboy hat on every week on Live PD. And I say, is Mark talking today? And the guy goes, oh no, he came in to hear you speak. What are you talking about? So here's a guy that did not come up through the ranks. He was a sheriff's deputy, had to run in as a deputy with the sheriff at the time, ends up leaving the sheriff's department, comes back years later and runs for sheriff with no rank experience because we think, oh, you got to go up the ranks, and comes in and immediately flips a switch on leadership in that agency. The entire culture changes almost overnight. And it's hard to believe until you see it. And that's just one example of leaders always learn. Here's Mark. He's not going to learn a whole lot from me, but he understands the importance of hearing from other people. And we struck up a friendship that day, and I've been in his agency ever since. And I just came from there about a month ago. And here's a quick story. So for years in my seminars, I would have this sort of engagement with the audience. I'd say, okay, tell me who you are, why you're here, rank the leadership in your agency. And it was very public. They rank it from 1 to 10. Well, I started noticing that if you're there with other people in your agency, or maybe you're there with your boss, I probably wasn't getting the most honest answers. So a couple of years ago, I decided to just put this online where they hit a QR code, totally anonymous. So while we're there talking, they start hitting the ranking system. And nationally, I'm getting about a 60 to 70% below average in leadership. I only have 3 choices because everything, below average, average, above average. I mean, because if you go poor or great, it's subjective. Well, I'm getting a 65 to 70% below average across the nation. And I'm there at Mark's agency. I was there for a whole week. We're basically repeating the class every day so other people can come in, knowing that I'm in a friendly place. I mean, most of these folks have been around Mark and his staff, and Deputy Chief Matt Thomas, a bunch of other great people there in the county. And I noticed on day one, man, it's a different crowd. I'm not getting like, they just don't, oh man, what's going on here? What's going on? Well, I found out, I do the survey, comes back 100% above average.
Oh, wow.
100% above average, which I was like, oh my goodness, like is this even possible? Well, then I do it the rest of the week to the different, I mean, it ran 85 to 90% above average. There was none below average. Not one person attended that training that week. This is completely anonymous, completely. Right. And I thought, and I told Mark, I said, man, I cannot believe this. And he said, man, we're just trying to do, he said, Travis, you're talking about it. He said, we're just actually trying to do it.
Yeah.
And Mark doesn't even know anything from me. He was doing this already. But and it's nothing complicated. I'm talking to the deputies there, and I said, tell me what's different about here. And they're saying things simple, Tim. That's why leadership's not complicated. They let me do my job. They support me. They care for me. They believe in me. Like, these are the most simplistic, basic things you could do for an employee.
Yep.
And that agency was, I never thought I could see that. Because face it, even the 5-star greatest things on Amazon have the occasional person that hates the product, right?
That's right.
Not one person. Not one person. In fact, one more story about that. I was there 2 years ago. I'm walking out at a break, and I see this canine officer in the back. He's probably mid-40s. He caught my attention. He's all canine out. He's got an external vest on. He's in shape. You know, he looks all, you know, I said, "Hey, man, how you doing?" I start talking to him. I said, "How's things going here?" And he goes, "It's awesome." He sounded like a rookie. Guy been on 25 years. He goes, "It's awesome, Travis. This is the best place. It's just awesome." And I'm like, you don't hear that from a 25-year-old veteran, you know.
They're burned out
And I said, "Well, why is it awesome?" He goes, this is all he said. He goes, "They care about me." That's all he said. They care about me. We have messed this up to a point to where if we would just support and care for people, you would have almost everybody in your agency thinking you were the rock star in leadership, right?
Yep.
And so if somebody, you know, Mark Lamb is and Matt Thomas, who is his deputy chief under him, they have just taken what we talk about. And honestly, I'm not trying to take credit for that, because they were doing this long before I came around. But they have just taken these basic, simple leadership principles, and it's not in their head. They actually practice it. And one other quick story, I was over. They gave me access to their gym after hours. I'm looking at every department has this, Tim, at the wall of all the chiefs or sheriffs, right?
Oh, exactly right.
And
yeah.
the current chief or sheriff is always on the wall, right? It's just a list of all of them. Every department I've ever been in, including mine, it's the list of 100 years of chiefs or sheriffs, and the current one is always there at the end. And I'm looking at this wall, and Mark's not there. And I'm like, what is going on here? I've never seen this. Well, come to find out, that's done on purpose, because Mark says, this isn't about me. I don't need to put my picture up there to know who I am. This isn't about me. I mean, you walk into sheriff's departments around this country, you see the sheriff's name in 15-foot letters.
Yeah.
It's out front in the parking lot. It's on the cars, for goodness sakes. Not at this place. I mean, they actually practice it. He says, "It's not about me, it's about them. Why would I put my picture there?"
That's impressive.
I mean, it's just amazing, and it's not complicated. And I think, unfortunately, we know this. We're just not doing it for whatever reason, and the profession is really suffering from it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. You know, the thing about the canine guy saying, you know, they care about me. I can go back to when I was a young officer, maybe on 4 years, 5 years, and he was a lieutenant at the time, and then he promoted to captain, and then left us and became a chief. But I remember he wanted me to do something. I was whatever he asked, I was doing it. I was helping him out, doing some things. And I remember one time, I can picture it now. I'm walking down the hallway. We're walking towards each other, and we're probably 20 feet away. This is embarrassing for me, but I'm going to say it because it meant a lot in what the end result was. We were walking towards each other, and the SWAT van had to be moved or driven somewhere. And from about 20 feet, he threw me the keys, and I let them hit the floor. And I said, I don't want to do it today, because I'd been doing it all the time, and I was just, you know, I had a bad moment. And he walked over, picked up the keys, and said, "Let's go talk." So I said, well, he wasn't mad. We sat down behind closed doors. He was so understanding, and he, in a nutshell, he said some very nice things about, you know, me working and whatnot. And he said, so we, through a long talk, it was positive. At the end, I remember before he walked out, he's got up, turned around, he goes, "If I ever throw keys at you again, catch them." And I said, "Get it. I got it." But he wasn't mad. So I was like, okay, I learned from that, because I was being a jerk. And he sat me down and gave me a lesson. So it was a teachable moment for me, and it really stands out. Another guy who promoted to sergeant when I got on, just before I came on, promoted to sergeant, made lieutenant. I should say every time, but most times, whenever I saw him, we didn't see each other a whole lot. He would always say, he knew my wife's name, and he'd say, "How's, you know, doing today? How are the girls doing? I have 2 daughters. How are the girls doing?" And it wasn't just because it was in passing. We'd sit and talk about it. And he's retired long before me. But those 2 gentlemen, and not because of their rank, but they truly did care. The one guy, the first guy, he cared because he said, "Don't do that. That's not good," basically. And the next guy really showed that he took to heart people and their families. So that's always stuck with me. That was 30 years ago, 25 years ago.
It's amazing that that is so that's so top of mind for you, because that's how easy this stuff is. I was 2 years on the department, and our chief at the time did a monthly ride along, which I remember that because no chief since ever did that. But I always thought that was cool as a young officer that the chief would come out, because my agency was a larger agency. You saw the chief at funerals and graduations. You didn't see the chief other than that. But I always thought it was cool until one day his administrative assistant called me and said, "Hey, the chief's riding with you next month." And I'm like, of course, I freak out. I'm a 2-year officer.
Yeah.
He comes out, and it's obviously I was nervous, but we got into it. It was a good day. And he thanked me in the car. we were from 3:30 to 11:30 at night. We're getting out of the car 11:30 midnight. He goes, we'd already said our goodbyes, thank yous, whatever. He bought my lunch. Well, it was a fine day. It was very neat for a young officer to get to experience that. He's walking away, and I'm walking away, and he says, "Travis." And this is 28, 29 years ago. I remember like it was yesterday. In fact, I get emotional every time I tell the story. I turn around and say, "Yeah, Chief." He goes, "Hey, I really appreciate today. You're a great cop." Like he spent 4 seconds, and you could tell, it's like you could tell he was authentic. You could tell he meant it. And man, I drew on those words my entire career. I had bad months, bad years, just whenever I felt like throwing in the towel, I would draw on those words. And I've often thought to myself, if he can have that kind of influence off 4 or 5 seconds, what could we do as leaders?
Oh, yeah.
If you actually poured into people like that? And he doesn't remember it. I'm for sure he doesn't remember it. It was so impactful. I wrote it in my book. I wrote the story in my book. But just like you, man, just something like that where you care for people, it goes so far. And man, you talking about a profession that's just been beat up.
Yeah, yeah.
We could use a little bit of that today, and we still see the nonsense, unfortunately.
Yeah. So with that, what do you see as the future for law enforcement?
Well, it's going to go one or two ways, Tim.
Yeah.
The way I want it to go is we start leading, we get back to our mission, and we're good at that. We're very good at that. We've proven that. And we get back to, I get it. I had somebody online, they called me like a white supremacist because I'm talking about the good old days. This isn't what I call the good old days. We knew our mission 20 years ago. We knew what to do to reduce crime. By the way, if you don't like us reducing crime, tell the politicians to quit passing the crimes. They're passing laws they ask us to enforce. Then they want to blame us for enforcing the laws. But it's the community that the community benefits when we enforce the laws, because the vast majority of your community is not committing crimes. They don't want people committing crimes around them. But getting back to leadership, what's important, and that's going to take leadership. That's the way it needs to go. Where I see it going right now as I speak is where we don't care about people, we care about technology, right? What you see all these chiefs doing, right? Oh, look at all this technology I'm doing. Look at this, look at that. Well, if you're not leading people, if you're not caring for people, that doesn't really matter. And we're sort of in the middle of where it's going. Now, that can be reversed with leadership. I don't want to be Debbie Downer here. We're seeing departments gradually losing people. Crime is rising. Any profession, if the mission is hurting, recruitment's hurting, retention's hurting, no profession really lasts forever. Right. That's called blockbuster, right? That's what happens.
That's exactly right.
When that happens, blockbuster didn't get away from their mission. They stayed with their mission too long, and they didn't adapt with the times. We just need to get back to the mission, because that's what's hurting us. And of course, when you don't do your mission and crime rises, you don't have the public support, right, to sort of help you with that. That's also hurts, because we go back to Robert Peel, police are the people, people are the police. Well, I don't care what kind of a breakdancing or midnight basketball you're doing. If crime is on the rise, the public does not really think you're doing a great job. And so we need to get back to that. But where I see it going, unfortunately, is because I see it doesn't get much worse than what we're experiencing right now across not every department, not every community, not every department. But you look at what's going on and you're like, what in the world is happening here? But you see the leaders that just double down on it, which is going to create a snowball effect. And The worst case scenario is you see the federal government has got their hands in every major law enforcement agency, right?
Oh,
they
yeah.
are through DOJ grants, through consent decrees, through a number of things. And once you take that money, you're now following their rules. And there are people at the high levels of the DOJ that have already said and talked about national policing and national rules and national policies. And is that why the chaos is happening? Is that why we're not getting support from some of these major organizations? Because as long as chaos is happening, the public will be open to another way of doing it. I mean, when the head of the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ says that she wants to reimagine police, we should be paying attention to that. What is she talking about when she says that?
What does that mean?
It's obviously not mission driven. And so you're already kind of seeing the bad road here. You're seeing departments contracting with sheriff departments. I do believe the future is if you were to ask me to guess, I want leadership to prevail. But if you ask me to guess before that happens, you're going to see sheriff departments as the last bastion of law of hope. Sheriff's departments understand the mission because they have to. The sheriff will be voted out if he doesn't reduce crime. Sheriffs are voted. Oddly enough, the one political position in law enforcement is the one still doing the mission. Municipalities gotten too political and don't do the mission. But sheriffs understand that if they do not provide a safer environment for their community, they will not be voted back in office. And so they have, for the most part, have stuck to the mission of law enforcement. And so sheriff's departments are going to be growing, getting bigger, more responsibility, more territory as municipalities fail. And that's going to be where people want to go to work because they're doing the mission. Nobody's going to work for Apple if they don't make cell phones, right? If Apple decides to be a humanitarian and just go to Uganda and give away free food, that does not make Apple very, very appealing to workers. But you're going to see a lot of people move into sheriff's departments, and sheriff's departments are going to get more and more important for our country, which is crazy to think, because if you'd asked me 20 years ago, would you leave a big city and go to the sheriff's department? Everybody would have said no.
No.
And today, people are doing that. Different pension system, different type of police, they're doing that routinely that way. And highway patrol, in a lot of states, are the same way. They understand that, they understand the mission. So you're going to see municipalities, if they don't change, they're going to be more obsolete. You're already seeing it. I mean, Minneapolis is contracting out with former many MPD officers are having to hire retirees back in.
Wow.
You're seeing a lot of communities that are folding their small police departments and just hiring the sheriff's department to contract out. You're already sort of seeing it go that way, and no one seems to be sounding the alarm on that. I personally think that if I live in a certain community, I want that community law enforcement agency that knows me better to police me. But that's not exactly happening. So I think you've got a strong, a strong cadre of sheriffs that understand what we're talking about, and they're going to become the most strongest advocates for law enforcement out there. And there's not a secret why I talk Pinell County Sheriff Mark Lamb. Those are the strongest departments I'm seeing right now. Sheriff Jesse Watts, Eureka County, Nevada, is another one. We're seeing sheriffs that understand this, and because they're the last people standing to understand it, they're seen as these great police leaders, which they are. But I wish we had a lot more. So I think if you were to ask me to guess, municipalities will continue to suffer. Now, there'll be some municipalities that don't, because I know municipalities right now that don't have any of these issues we're talking about because they're led well. But your larger cities, it's probably over for some of them. I mean, Seattle's not coming back. Portland's not coming back. Oakland is done. They're done. I mean, and now leadership can still save them, but I don't anticipate that happening. Leadership all of a sudden prevailing. So I think you're going to see you're going to see the rise of sheriff departments, the continuing lowering of municipalities if we don't start leading correct. That's a long answer, but that's sort of my end thought there.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. We'll see what happens. With that said, what are some words of encouragement that you would like to share with those still serving in the law enforcement profession?
Well, the great thing is the job, even though everything's changed around you, the job and the importance hasn't changed, right? It's still the greatest job on the planet. People make movies about you. People talk about you. They come up to you. They're not going to the exterminator Christmas party asking about their day. They're asking about you. Right. They don't have ride-along programs for lawyers or attorneys, right? Or accountants. I mean, people are enamored by what you do. The vast majority of the public, Gallup says between 75 and 85%, depending on the year, highly trust what you do. I mean, that's behind doctors and teachers for the most part. So you're one of the most well-respected professions out there. I know the media is not telling you that, but that's just what people are saying through the science. So people love what you do. People know the importance of what you do. There's huge support for what you do, regardless of what you may have heard. There is, and everybody working out there knows that. I don't care what city you're in. You've got people coming up to you every day saying, I really appreciate what you're doing, or buying them a meal or whatever. And so you're working in just the greatest job on the planet. And you have one of the most important roles in any profession, which is to protect people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have, I don't care how bad it is where you are, you have an individual responsibility to do that, to do your best to protect people, do your best to lead people, to influence people. I mean, think about it. Most of my high school friends, they're going to work every day. They're working in a cubicle. They're working on a line. They just work, go home. They're clocking in, going home. Yeah, there's probably a component of leadership there, but in law enforcement, it's in front of you every day. Yeah, you could be the first day rookie, but guess what you get to do that day? You get to go and encounter 30, 40, 50 citizens and impart their life, make their life better. You get to go out and help people. Almost no one gets to do that. And so they need to be encouraged. And I know the profession as a whole is suffering, but it's a quick turnaround if we understand leadership. And I would say, hold on where you are in a bad place for a little while, but if it's too bad, go to a place that's a lot better. There's a lot of great police departments out there. And it's just, to have one of the best jobs on the planet, to have a job where you can impart people and help people, and to have a chance to literally save people's lives on a daily basis. Everybody wants that job, right? So they certainly should be encouraged. Don't let the environment get you down, because that's not going to help you. That's only going to make things worse. You have to overcome that, sort of segment that away, and know that you have an individual job to do. Your squad may be terrible, your chief may be terrible, your department may be terrible, but you as an individual get to make your own decisions, so to speak.
Yeah. Plus, if there's an issue or a problem where you're at, see what you can do to make the change. I would tell guys, I remember giving a talk once with a few new officers, and right after graduation of the academy. And it was basically, I said, down the road, don't forget this day, but down the road, you may become cynical, upset, sarcastic. You may lose focus of what am I doing this for? Because you don't see the support, or you don't feel the support. And the encouragement was, I'm not saying I did the right thing or this is the best thing, but I said to them, in 10 years, if you feel that way, look back to this day, remember, number one, why you became a police officer. Remember how proud your family, they were of you to become a police officer, and try not to lose focus of the good that you do. And it can be difficult, but especially when people are just coming at you all the time. But if there's an issue within the agency, try to be an agent of change and see what you can do to improve that, rather than just talk about it and complain about it. See what you can do to help out.
And there are a lot of people with that. That's why I do what I do, because we're trying to give resources and encouragement to men and women every day. And, we put too much stock into the pension check. We're all work to get to the end for the pension check. But the issue is, that's not what's important. Yeah, it's all great to get a pension check. But if you look back and go, I maxed my pension out, but I didn't do what I should have done. I didn't help when I should have helped, or I lost focus at year 15 and just gave up and just was retired on duty. That's a miserable life, Tim. And but if you can look back and go, man, I gave it all, man. I put my feet on the ground every day. I wasn't always successful, but I gave it every bit of opportunity I had to make a difference. And you may not know the complete difference you made, because not everybody comes back and tells you that, but you made a difference. There's going to be street officers that's going to have a much happier retirement than the most high profile police chief you've ever heard of, because they know at the end of the day, they did what was right, even when it didn't benefit them. And if you're in this profession now, I'm out. My time is up. I have to look back. I have what I have. That's a snapshot. If you're in this profession right now, if you're like everybody else, like you and me, you probably made a few mistakes in the past, but you get to put your feet on the ground tomorrow and keep going. That's pretty beautiful, right? And so you have a pretty incredible opportunity, this window of opportunity to really make a difference. I don't care whether you got 1 day left or 1 year left or 20 years left. Make the most of that.
Well said. All right, we're going to wrap up here. But before we do, is there anything you want to say in closing, or just add maybe something we didn't talk about?
Tim, we covered a lot, man. I really appreciate you bringing me on. I really do. I don't discount the importance this stuff can make. If somebody's going to run across, God's going to ordain this in somebody's ears, they're going to run across this and listen to this, and it's going to help just the right person. We don't always know who it is. So thank you for the opportunity to do that, and for all that you do. But, we're trying to be more than just a podcast or a blog or content or training, if you go to travisyates.org, plug in there. I've got a bunch of resources there. Jump on the email list. We're rolling out a bunch of stuff. You don't have to come see me in class. We're going to be rolling out a bunch of stuff online. We just want to be a resource and encouragement to everybody out there at all ranks, because especially those new in the profession, we want to help you because you are the future. And at the end of the day, I've got kids, I got families, I care about this country. We need a strong law enforcement presence with great leadership, and I'm going to do my part, and I hope they will as well.
Yes. I know you mentioned it already, but let me back up. I'm so glad that you came on. So thank you for taking the time. Obviously, you have a busy schedule and family, and it's a weekend as we record this. So I appreciate that very much. But I know you already mentioned this, but real quick, tell our listeners, and I'll put this down in the show notes, but how they can go to your website and your podcast.
Yeah, well, the easiest way to remember it is you go to travisyates.org. Don't type in .com. You will not get me. But if you go to travisyates.org, everything branches off from that. You'll see Substack. You can hit that, subscribe to that. You'll get weekly articles. You can see the podcast. You can subscribe on any platform you want on that. And then anything new that comes up, if you plug your email in the email thing, we don't send out a bunch of emails, but if anything new comes up, any resources we want to let you know about, we'll send it out that way. So that's really the easiest way to plug in. We've got a bunch of stuff coming up, certifications, training, a bunch of things to really help people. And if you plug your email in there, you'll be notified of it when that occurs.
That's great. That's great. And I know I mentioned this at the intro, but I've subscribed to both. I really do. I highly recommend that people do check out your Substack, your website, and listen to your podcast, because they won't be disappointed. And hopefully you continue to get subscribers to all of those. But hopefully after this gets published, this episode of our podcast, you'll get more. So fingers crossed for that. But I want to commend you for being passionate about law enforcement, the profession, for continued support of the men and women who they sacrifice so much to make sure others are safe, for sharing your knowledge on the topic, one topic of leadership, and for expressing your thoughts and your opinions on your Substack and in your podcast. Really, it takes a special person doing it while they're working, but to have that fire and that passion to continue to do it, even though they're no longer in that profession, in a way to help other people. I commend you for that. So thank you. I also want to thank you for your 30 years of service as a police officer, commander, and for your dedication to serving your community. Appreciate you taking the time and for being a guest on the Behind the Line podcast.
Thank you, Tim, so much, and thank you for what you do.